to offer prompt opposition, which he did in nearly these words: "If all poor men begin to come here and to beg money for their children, individuals will never be satisfied and the state will be bankrupt. Certainly our ancestors did not grant the privilege of occasionally proposing amendments or of suggesting, in our turn for speaking, something for the general advantage, in order that we might in this house increase our private business and property, thereby bringing odium on the Senate and on emperors, whether they concede or refuse their bounty. In fact, it is not a request, but an importunity, as utterly unreasonable as it is unforeseen, for a senator, when the House has met on other matters, to rise from his place and, pleading the number and age of his children, put a pressure on the delicacy of the Senate, then transfer the same constraint to myself, and, as it were, break open the exchequer, which, if we exhaust it by improper favoritism, will have to be replenished by crimes. Money was given you, Hortalus, by Augustus, but without solicitation, and not on the condition of its being always given. Otherwise industry will languish, and idleness be encouraged, if a man has nothing to fear, nothing to hope from himself, and every one in utter recklessness will expect relief from others, thus becoming useless to himself and a burden to me. These and like remarks, though listened to with assent by those who make it a practice to eulogize everything coming from sovereigns, both good and bad, were received by the majority in silence or with suppressed murmurs. Tiberius perceived it, and, having paused a while, said that he had given Hortalus his answer, but that if the senators thought it right, he would bestow 200,000 sesterces on each of his children of the male sex. The others thanked him. Hortalus said nothing, either from alarm, or because even in his reduced fortunes he clung to his hereditary nobility. Nor did Tiberius afterwards show any pity, though the house of Hortensius sank into shameful poverty. That same year the daring of a single slave, had it not been promptly checked, would have ruined the state by discord and civil war. A servant of Postumus Agrippa, Clemens by name, having ascertained that Augustus was dead, formed a design beyond a slave's conception of going to the island of Planasia and seizing Agrippa by craft or force and bringing him to the armies of Germany. The slowness of a merchant vessel thwarted his bold venture. Meanwhile the murder of Agrippa had been perpetrated, and then, turning his thoughts to a greater and more hazardous enterprise, he stole the ashes of the deceased, sailed to Cosa, a promontory of Etruria, and there hid himself in obscure places till his hair and beard were long. In age and figure he was not unlike his master. Then, through suitable emissaries who shared his secret, it was rumoured that Agrippa was alive, first in whispered gossip, soon, as is usual with forbidden topics, in vague talk which found its way to the credulous ears of the most ignorant people, or of restless and revolutionary schemers. He himself went to the towns as the day grew dark, without letting himself be seen publicly, or remaining long in the same places. But, as he knew that truth gains strength by notoriety and time, falsehood by precipitancy and vagueness, he would either withdraw himself from publicity, or else forestall it. It was rumoured meanwhile throughout Italy, and was believed at Rome, that Agrippa had been saved by the blessing of heaven. Already at Ostia, where he had arrived, he was the centre of interest to a vast concourse, as well as to secret gatherings in the capital, while Tiberius was distracted by the doubt whether he should crush this slave of his by military force, or allow time to dissipate a silly credulity. Sometimes he thought that he must overlook nothing, sometimes that he need not be afraid of everything, his mind fluctuating between shame and terror. At last he entrusted the affair to Sallustius Crispus, who chose 2 of his dependents, some say they were soldiers, and urged them to go to him as pretended accomplices, offering money and promising faithful companionship in danger. They did as they were bidden, then, waiting for an unguarded hour of night, they took with them a sufficient force, and, having bound and gagged him, dragged him to the palace. When Tiberius asked him how he had become Agrippa, he is said to have replied, "As you became Caesar." He could not be forced to divulge his accomplices. Tiberius did not venture on a public execution, but ordered him to be slain in a private part of the palace, and his body to be secretly removed. And although many of the emperor's household and knights and senators were said to have supported him with their wealth and helped him with their counsels, no inquiry was made. At the close of the year was consecrated an arch near the temple of Saturn to commemorate the recovery of the standards lost with Varus under the leadership of Germanicus and the auspices of Tiberius, a temple of Fors Fortuna by the Tiber, in the gardens which Caesar the dictator bequeathed to the Roman people, a chapel to the Julian family, and statues at Bovilli to the divine Augustus. In the consulship of Gaius Caecilius and Lucius Pomponius, Germanicus Caesar, on the 26th day of May, celebrated his triumph over the Cherusci, Chatti, and Angriverii, and the other tribes which extend as far as the Elbe. There were borne in procession spoils, prisoners, representations of the mountains, the rivers, and battles, and the war, seeing that he had been forbidden to finish it, was taken as finished. The admiration of the beholders was heightened by the striking comeliness of the general and the chariot which bore his 5 children. Still there was a latent dread when they remembered how unfortunate in the case of Drusus his father had been the favour of the crowd, how his uncle Marcellus, regarded by the city populace with passionate enthusiasm, had been snatched from them while yet a youth, and how short-lived and ill-starred were the attachments of the Roman people. End of Book 2, Part 2. Recording by Graham Redman.